All right. Well, preseason for the Dolphins has concluded. Brett decided that this was going to be the week that he went on vacation. So I was tasked with finding the best person I could to fill the seat. So Kevin Fielder is here with us. Kevin, not Fiedler. Kevin, how you doing?
Look, I would argue I was like probably your eighth option, right? I'm probably the waiver wire pickup that the Dolphins pick up at wide receiver to fill the room for week one. I don't think I'm Jalen Waddle. I think I'm like, I don't know, who could they pick up who's like a free? I'm like Hunter Renfrow.
Well, I would love for the Dolphins to pick up Hunter Renfrow. You also match Hunter Renfrow in a couple other ways. So this is wonderful. But before we get started and before people start coming in here, I have specifically the people in my fantasy football league. I have a fantasy football keeper question for you.
All right, I'm ready.
Here's the scenario. It's a 12-team league. My current keepers are Kenneth Walker, Khalil Shakir, Chase Brown, and Brendan Aubrey. Chase Brown, Shakir, and Aubrey are my last three picks of the entire draft, and Kenneth Walker is a sixth-round pick. I'm deciding between the following players with my last keeper spot. Alvin Kamara with the last pick of round 4, or Devin Singletary with the first pick of round 11.
I think I would rather have Singletary just because my problem with Kamara is that, like, as good as he is, right, and he's incredibly talented, the rust has clearly shown over the last few years. He's not looked like the same player as, when he was rushing for 6 touchdowns in like Grinch cleats in week 12 and ruining half of people's fantasy teams. He's not that same player. He's still incredibly good, but like in the 4th round, I think either you can get better or just draft Alvin Kamara again. And Devin Singletary, as much as like you look at the Giants offense and the offensive line in particular, and you're entirely uninspired by whatever they're running out there, especially on the right side of the line, he's a starter, right? Like he's going to be the starting running back for an NFL football team this year.
In week one.
In week one, right? By week 5 or week 6, maybe that changes. And I know that Tyrone Tracy guy is like really big in New York and people love him. Maybe by week 5 or 6 that changes, but I would rather take a risk in the 11th round that, the guy I'm taking is a starting running back in the NFL, as opposed to like, I don't know, like I haven't done enough mock drafts to really fully gauge it, but I feel like in week 11 you're picking some like really high upside wide receiver 4 on the Arizona Cardinals, hoping that he's like the counter to Marvin Harrison Jr. by week 12. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't seem like a very inspiring group by round 11.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess getting a starting running back. I always get worried when it comes to fantasy football, drafting running backs from bad football teams.
Yeah, I mean, it is a very risky play because, man, the guy you're taking is probably not very good if he's the starting running back for a very bad football team. Unless it's Saquon Barkley, but they also hated that man like with his entire life. They hated everything about that man. So,
and now they still hate that man. Because he's going to be doing it for the Eagles.
So, like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if either pick is very inspiring. I don't know what Alvin Kamara's ADP is. I guess I can look that up real quick. But like,
it's right around that. It's right around the end of the 3rd, early 4th round.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could probably get away with it. But like my thought process with keepers, right, is that like, can I draft the guy at that same spot if I don't love any of the other options? And like maybe you don't get Alvin Kamara, but maybe you get someone who is Alvin Kamara just on a different team.
Yeah.
And like at that point, man, like I don't know if I'm keeping Alvin Kamara for the sake of like drafting Alvin Kamara again. If it's another option. Now, I guess some of that could depend on like who everyone else is keeping. I don't know like how these, I don't know. Every league is different in terms of who keeps who. So I don't know for sure of like how these things work. because I try and avoid keeper leagues because I overthink everything way too much, and I'll spend 10 minutes debating on if this guy in the 13th round is worth keeping. So like for my own mental health, I've decided not to do that. But yeah, I mean, like I think Alvin Kamara is probably the safer pick because you know what you're getting with him, and he's probably going to be drafted somewhere in the 4th or 5th round, or at least somewhere in that range. But I would have to look at who the other running backs would be available at that time, because thinking out loud, like Isaiah Pacheco, James Cook, I would feel more confident with both of those over Alvin Kamara, just for opportunity, for offensive production. Those two are in the best offenses in football, or two of the best offenses in football. And I don't know if anyone's been watching the Saints preseason games. That team is not one of the best football offenses in football. They are quite the opposite. They are a lot closer to one of the worst.
I would be really surprised if Dennis Allen made it out of this year.
I was shocked he made it out of last year, I'll be honest. Well,
yeah.
I was a little shocked he made it out of last year. I thought for sure he was gone. Just for whether they thought they had better options or whether he was just an awful coach. It turns out he's probably not that good of a coach, but I thought for sure he'd be out of there by the end of the year. But I guess they're giving him the ceremonial, you know what? Good luck.
Good luck, and then laughing at him. But shifting from bad football teams and starting players, last week I gave a list of 4 players that I listed as fantasy sleepers. And they weren't giant sleepers last week. It was Jonathan Brooks, Tyjae Spears, Deontay Johnson, and George Pickens. This week I have a much bigger list. And these are guys, this next list of guys are guys you're going to get near the end of your fantasy football drafts. But who is Kevin Fielder drafting in the last couple rounds of his fantasy football drafts?
Jeez. I got to think this through, because I'm very much one of those guys who just goes like, I don't know, man, this third string running back could probably be the running back here. I don't know. You don't know either.
Nobody knows. Like, that's what makes it fun, and that's why we do it.
I don't know. I like Ricky Pearsall out of San Francisco. That offense is incredibly productive. I don't think he would be like last round of the draft kind of player, but in terms of production, there's an opportunity for production this year. Whether Ayuk is in Pittsburgh by week 1 or he's playing on a tag or on a new worked contract, like I don't think they can get away with running the ball as much as they did last year. I don't think they want to get away with that because that's a pathway to get Christian McCaffrey killed. And if Christian McCaffrey gets killed, oh man, I don't like that running back room as much as maybe some other people do. But look, that offense is productive. Whatever you think about Brock Purdy, the quarterback, he's been productive over the last 2 years now. And so I like Ricky Pearsall. I drafted, who did I draft a few days ago? Trey Benson out of Arizona. He's not another deep sleeper, but there's an opportunity there in Arizona with James Conner's just sort of lack of production over the last few years. And again, he's one of those guys who you're probably taking a little earlier, but he's probably one of the best rookie running backs in the draft in general. I'm sure there's a few wide receivers I'm missing, but like, I don't know. I think, Jaden Reed from Green Bay. I think he's the wide receiver 1 there. And the wide receiver 1 in Green Bay is not an entirely difficult bar to clear because it's Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, who never plays by week 13 of the year, and Dontavian Wicks. And I know a lot of people on Twitter love Dontavian Wicks.
A lot of people love
Wicks. He is the I don't know how to say it, like the gem of like everyone's like Twitter profile is like, that guy is the guy I want. And I'm like, sure, man. If you really want 600 yards, go ahead.
Yeah, that's the guy. He gets lifted and Reed gets dropped a little bit. When you say it, Reed is going to get more production at the end.
Yeah, I think Jaden Reed is probably the more productive wide receiver there, at least for fantasy purposes. And I don't know. I think they're going to throw the ball to the tight ends a lot. Luke Musgrave is an incredibly productive tight end in terms of the receiving game. And they've got a couple running backs who are probably decent. Whether AJ Dillon wants to play football or play Farming Simulator by week 15 of the year, who knows? But like, that's a room that, like, I don't know, someone's got to step up in the wide receiver room. And my money would be on Jaden Reed as of today. As someone who has watched maybe like 5 minutes of Packers film since the season ended.
So I'll give you. I have 5 running backs, 5 receivers, and 5 tight ends for you.
Ooh.
The running backs, the one that's the least sleeper of this sleeper list is Zamir White.
Yeah.
I think that whether it's Minshew to start or whether it's O'Connell, which it's going to be Minshew, but I think they're going to need to throw the ball a lot. Brock Bowers is also, spoiler alert, one of my tight ends because I think that whether Devontae Adams is on that team or not, I think they're going to need to use the tight end a lot. And between Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer, they're going to both have production. But I think Zamir White is going to be in that middle to upper echelon of RB2s. The other names on that list, I think Rico Dowdle is being drafted way too low right now.
I mean, that Dallas room, right? Like, I think people forget that Ezekiel Elliott was not good last year.
Yeah, no,
Why
there's
are we
no
picking Zeke?
way that he's going to be a starter. And you know what? And I've been waiting since I saw it to talk to you about it specifically. Deuce Vaughn is having a good preseason.
Yeah, like, I don't know. Like, I would pick Deuce Vaughn if I was like, if I really wanted a stake in that backfield. And I'm going to be honest, I probably don't pick a stake in that backfield at any point during any of my drafts. And I have about 8 of them coming up. I don't think I'm picking anyone in that room because, man, it's not a very good room. But like, if I was picking someone from that room, I'd take Deuce Vaughn over Zeke.
Yeah.
Like, even if Zeke,
especially where they're being drafted.
Yeah, even if Zeke has the opportunity to be the guy, he looked awful last year in New England. He didn't even look like a running back in New England. So I don't know. I feel like I'm just avoiding that to some degree.
Yeah, if I can get Deuce Vaughn in the last couple rounds, I think that's the point. But I think Rico is probably going to end up playing that Tony Pollard-like role. And then the other 3 guys are going to start the year as backups. But all 3 are guys that I think can take the starting position at some point. Jaleel McLaughlin in Denver. Javonte Williams hasn't been healthy in a couple years. So I could definitely see him reclaiming that role. Blake Corum with the Rams.
Ooh,
I think
like
he fits that offense so well. And I could definitely see, I mean, the Rams, even when they have running backs that are good, they still like to kind of spread around those touches. So I could see Blake Corum getting a number of carries. And then my deep sleeper is Ray Davis of the Bills. I think that Ray Davis, I think Ray Davis by the back end of the season will be getting more carries than James Cook, or James Cook will be a guy that gets injured and Ray Davis will take over.
I don't buy James Cook. I don't buy him any year, right? Like, I think he's a very talented running back, but they don't run the ball, right? Like, they're only running the ball if Josh Allen has to try and truck 10 people into the end zone. So like, I don't know. Like, I would rather take Ray Davis, I think. I mean, I'd take either because I think that they probably have to run the ball a little bit more this year than they were last year. But I would probably take Ray Davis late just because I loved what I saw in college from him. He was incredibly productive in the SEC. To some degree, that production carries over at some point.
Yeah. Moving on to the receivers. Like last time, the one that I think is the earliest draft pick of the 5 is Brian Thomas Jr.
Yeah.
I think his ADP is really starting to climb because people are realizing that, Christian Kirk is going to be that downfield threat, but Brian Thomas is going to play a huge role in that Jacksonville offense.
Yeah, I mean, he's been incredibly productive in preseason, and he's looked a lot better than I think some people expected. I like him over Gabe Davis in that offense.
Yeah, for sure. And then the other 4 names, Jalen Tolbert with the Cowboys, Jordan Whittington with the Rams, I think is right now a slightly popular sleeper. It's looking like he's going to be the receiver 3 in LA. And we know the receiver 3 in LA is usually a good job. Diami Brown in Washington is a name that I love. So this was pre-Jahan Dotson trade. We were at the Dolphins-Commanders game, and there was a play. It was a screen play to Brown that he took right up that Washington sideline. And I knew it was him, and he really looked improved from what I saw out of him the last couple of years. And I think that part of the reason they were comfortable trading Jahan Dotson was because Diane Brown is going to be that receiver too, especially to start that season. And the last name is DJ Chark with the Chargers. I think that he's going to end up being their receiver one. Lad McConkey is going to get a lot of the slot plays, but somebody's going to need to catch the ball over the top. I don't buy that Josh Palmer is a top receiver yet. So people are going Palmer. I go the DJ Chark route.
I want to add one more, and this one's a lot deeper, I think, because they've already got 2 established wide receivers, and that's Jalen McMillan in Tampa. I love Mike Evans. I love Chris Godwin. Jalen McMillan is a very gifted wide receiver, and whether it happens early or it takes a while, right? Like in terms of guys I'm taking super late in a draft, hoping that they hit, the opportunity's there for him to hit. I know Jermaine Burton, the Alabama rookie, has looked good in Cincinnati. I don't love him as much because you have T. Higgins, you have Jamar Chase, you have I'm going to butcher his last name, Andre Yoshivas or something like that. But he's someone who they've used a lot in preseason. So I think I would probably avoid Jermaine Burton, who seems to be a little bit more popular, just because, man, they got so much talent in that room. I don't know how he gets on the field early.
Yeah, and I'm usually a guy moving on to tight ends that likes to take the Travis Kelce early in the draft. This is one of the first years that I see a lot of depth to the tight end position. I think the obvious one that if you're taking outside of the first couple tight ends, I think Trey McBride is a really obvious one to make a jump this season. I do think Kyler is going to have a better year. And I think that outside of Marvin Harrison Jr., once people start spreading out to those receivers, I think Trey McBride is going to have a really productive year. I already mentioned Brock Bowers. My last 3 names, I have Colby Parkinson, the Rams. It looks like he's going to be starting in LA, and if you can get a Sean McVay tight end, you take it. And then I'm going to be a little selfish with my last 2 and go with Jonnu Smith and Mike Gesicki. I think both Jonnu and Mike are being drafted right at the end of the draft. You just named the number 3 weapons for the Bengals. I wouldn't be super surprised if Mike Gesicki starts getting some looks in the red zone in that role that Tyler Boyd used to get him, and get some underneath stuff for the Bengals and be one of those guys that's a touchdown or bust type player. And I think that the Dolphins are finally going to incorporate the tight end a lot more this year. I think that's going to be Jonnu Smith. And we'll talk about the Dolphins here in a few minutes. But I think another guy that I'll throw on people's radar, kind of like we threw Deuce Vaughn with Rico Dowdle, is Julian Hill with Jonnu Smith, because the Dolphins love Julian Hill.
I don't see the fantasy upside with a guy like Julian Hill. I think he's a really good blocker, and he fits what they want to do in the run game. I think that if there were a situation where Jonnu Smith got hurt, Durham Smythe got hurt, right? Like I think that's probably where Julian Hill then becomes a viable name for fantasy. Is if like the 2 guys that ahead of him get hurt. I think they would just use the wide receivers a lot more, or go to 2 running back sets with Jalen Wright and Devon Achane. Then I guess run out there with Julian Hill and give him those same looks that they give Jonnu Smith. I do love the Trey McBride pick because shout out to JP Acosta at SB Nation. He's been hyping Trey McBride up all offseason. And look, man, there is so much to like about his game. And he's not as deep of a sleeper as other guys, obviously, because a lot of people know who Trey McBride is. But the way that offense is going to have to run this year, man, I'm taking him over guys like Dallas Goedert, and other guys in that sort of same range, because he's a very good football player. And that tape is incredible. And I think there might be an argument that he's a top 10 tight end in football, which is not saying too much because the tight end position is not exactly filled with receiving options, but he's incredible.
Yeah, well, I think what everybody's here for is to move on to the Dolphins. And are you as glad as I am that the preseason is over for us and you don't have to watch players get hurt anymore?
It can't hurt me. I don't have to try and I don't have to try and pretend that the guy they signed off the streets last week is a viable practice squad option. I am so glad we are not spending today talking about Anthony McFarland as a practice squad option. Jordan, I can't tell you how happy I am that we're not talking about that. So much joy that I don't have to be on this episode trying to talk people off the Anthony McFarland ledge.
Yeah, no, we're going to talk about some of the bigger situations with the Dolphins, but we're not breaking down one guy making the practice squad over the other. And I'm sure if Brett were here, he would love to do that and would love to take it.
I would absolutely do it. Let's be clear. I would spend the next 20 minutes talking about why Storm Duck is going to be on the practice squad and why it's going to cook so hard when he's elevated for a Week 5 game. But
did you use the word cook with the word duck?
Yes. And that was not intentional, but I will now say it was intentional. No one can stop me from this.
Okay, so the first Dolphins question. Do they keep two quarterbacks? Do they keep 3 quarterbacks? And if the answer is 2, who is it?
I've sat here all preseason, and I posted 53-man roster projections since the end of the first preseason game. Right. And it's changed because before the preseason started, I thought they'd keep 3 in Mike White and Skylar Thompson and Tua, obviously. From watching all of them play and considering the new third quarterback rule, it is far more likely that they keep 2 to keep numbers at other positions because their depth at certain spots is so deep that like you want to keep some of these guys and you can't keep them. I would rather keep a 6th defensive lineman than keep a 3rd quarterback.
I agree.
And I don't know what the Dolphins do. If it was me, I'm keeping Skylar Thompson because he's been the better preseason quarterback.
Yes.
And to some degree, that has to matter in a quarterback competition. I always say we're not in the room, so I don't know. Like maybe Mike White is looking far better in closed training camp sessions than Skylar Thompson. I don't know that, and I can't pretend to know that, right? But from what we've been able to watch, you cannot sit here and say that Mike White's been a better quarterback than Skylar Thompson. And I think Mike White's a gamer. I think that when it matters and he's in a game, he plays a lot better. But I think I would keep Skylar Thompson. But do the Dolphins try and sneak him onto the practice squad as that 3rd quarterback? Because I don't know for sure. But I feel like whichever one you cut, you're not getting back, right? Because I don't think Mike White takes a practice squad spot to be the 3rd quarterback for an entire season. I don't think Skylar Thompson does that either. And so either you hope that you can convince one of them to take that practice squad spot. And if that's the case, I think Mike White's probably the one getting cut. And you're hoping to put him on the practice squad. But I would feel gun to my head right now on August 24th. I think Skylar Thompson's the quarterback 2 in Miami.
I agree.
I don't know that for sure. I think like a lot of people are just sort of generalizing this and saying, yeah, it's Skylar Thompson. Look at how well he played the 3rd preseason game. But I feel like we also forget that Skylar Thompson also wasn't that good before the 3rd preseason game. Come on, guys. Two days ago, we were talking about how bad the quarterback 2 position was in Miami.
We still want Tannehill. I want to be clear. I want Tannehill back.
Who's we? I don't want Tannehill.
We as the list. We as.
Let's be clear here. I do not want Ryan Tannehill around the Dolphins anymore.
I more so want Tannehill back to see what number he would pick. Because
that would be
17
funny.
Can't be used. 7 can't be used. 1 can't be used. And he's running out of options. So I would love to see what.
And unfortunately, this isn't college where he could just choose 77.
Right, exactly.
Get away with it.
Exactly.
I mean, to answer the question, Skylar Thompson, I think, is probably the QB2, but I'm not confident in saying that because I think that Mike White has a lot of respect in that building as a veteran who's played well with the Jets in the past. And at times last season for the Dolphins in cleanup duty did not look awful. And now I always say, like, come on, he was also throwing to Robbie Chosen and Chase Claypool. So, like, it was basically preseason games for him. But I think it'll be Skylar Thompson. I wouldn't be shocked if it's Mike White.
And you can't discount the fact that Skylar Thompson, at the end of the day, kept us in a playoff game.
Yeah, and, like, I it's not progressed, right? Like he's not gotten better since his
No,
rookie
he's the
year, I
same
don't think.
guy.
But still, he's been in this offense the entire time. He's been in that room this entire time. He's learned this offense. And to some degree, like I think that he's got the same chaos gene that Mike White's got in the sense of like, if he's got to play in a preseason game, it's not going to be pretty. You are going to hate yourself for having to watch that play for the entire game. You're going to hate having to watch Skylar Thompson play football. But there are going to be some plays where you're like, oh man, Skylar Thompson might be a QB1 in 2 years. And it's never going to happen. But like, I don't know. I think there's some fun in watching Skylar Thompson have to play football in an actual NFL game, not a preseason game.
Well, luckily, if Skylar Thompson were to start a game, and because I'm the master of transitions, Skylar Thompson would be very lucky because he has a great running back room.
God,
And we already know that Kevin doesn't want to spend 20 minutes talking about Anthony McFarland. And
I will spend 20 minutes talking about Chris Brooks, though. If we want to spend 20 minutes talking about Chris Brooks, I'm here for it.
I think it's also obvious that it's Mostert, Achane, Wright, and obviously Alec Ingold's the fullback, but people like to throw him in the running back room. It's a question of, is it Chris Brooks or is it Jeff Wilson?
Or is it either? Is it none
or
of
is
them?
it neither? And right now, to me, again, it's similar to the quarterback 3 situation that is keeping that extra corner or that extra defensive tackle or that extra guard worth giving that guy up, worth keeping your 4th running back. Or if Mostert, Achane, and Wright all go down, you figure it out at that point.
I think that, like, so yes, you have to prepare for situations that are beyond reasonable doubt, right? Like, you have to prepare if all of your offensive guards get hurt and someone's got to play offensive guard for you. I think it is incredibly unlikely that, regardless of what people want to say about the Dolphins' injury problems, that they are in a situation where all 3 running backs are hurt. I think that is in the same game, and none of them can return. I think that is incredibly unlikely.
Yeah.
And I say that because I now know it's going to happen. It's now going to happen, and
for sure.
I guess Malik Washington would be your running back at that point.
It could be Washington. It could be Tyreek Hill. It could be Izu Kanma.
What if the solution is you just don't play running back and you just go empty the entire game?
I think that's also definitely crossed their mind.
But like, I think that the more reasonable answer is that they keep the 4th running back, A, for special teams reasons, B, because they probably have a way that they can do it, whether it's keeping him to, again, like, I guess the other thing you have to think of is guys are going to be on the roster to be put on IR, right? Like, there are certain guys who are going to be put on the roster to be put on different lists during the thing. But if we're keeping a 4th running back, and I don't know if that's the case, because as I think we've mentioned, there's so much depth at different positions that you'd love to keep someone in that room that you may not be able to keep. If they're keeping a 4th running back, I think Chris Brooks is the guy. And Jeff Wilson has a lot of respect for Mike McDaniel. He's played in this offense for years.
Did you catch when Alec Ingold on the broadcast last night said that Jeff Wilson broke his nose last week and was still playing?
I did catch that, and I was like, huh, that's interesting. And like, I think that to some degree, like, that probably shows that, man, like, he's going to fight through hell for this coaching staff. And to some degree, those guys are definitely guys who get put on rosters, especially as the 4th running back. But Chris Brooks has the benefit of being incredibly productive when he plays. And that's both in the regular season, dating back to last season when he got like reps against Denver and other teams really late. He's looked good in the preseason. He can play special teams. Like, I wouldn't be shocked. I think I would keep Chris Brooks. And I think Jeff Wilson is a very serviceable NFL running back. And whether you trade him, whether you cut him and let him go find his next spot and, you know, don't get in his way of doing so, but like, he's going to land somewhere. I think whoever you lose is going to land somewhere on an NFL roster. I think that I would rather have the upside of Chris Brooks than the floor of Jeff Wilson.
So when looking at the roster and really breaking down the numbers, I think the Dolphins can only afford, and afford meaning from a roster spot standpoint, one of a quarterback 3, a wide receiver 4, or a wide receiver 6. I think you're only.
I think you meant a running back 4 instead of a wide receiver 4.
I meant.
I was about to say, I mean, come on, they're keeping a 4th wide receiver. You have to keep
quarterback 3, running back 4, wide receiver 6.
Yeah, I think you could probably get away with 2 if you want to keep 3 tight ends and treat Alec Ingold as a tight end more so, which I wouldn't be against. I know everyone counts the fullback as a running back. I think the offense, Mike McDaniel, Frank Smith, probably count him more as a tight end in terms of how they use him, how he looks in person. Yeah. Looks like you could probably keep a wide receiver 6 and a running back 4 if you keep 3 tight ends, but I don't think they keep 3 tight ends.
I think they keep 4 tight ends for sure.
Yeah,
I love this tight end room. And I think on my roster, and we'll skip receiver and go back to receiver because we're talking about tight end, I have Jonnu, Hill, Smythe, and Fortson all making the roster, and then Tanner Connor and Rucci being on the practice squad.
Yeah, I was talking about this tight end room with someone earlier today, actually, and I said I love 6 tight ends in a room where they might only keep 3, because I love what Jody Fortson can bring to an offense, and it has not looked that great in preseason games, partly due to injury, partly due to probably who he's playing around. But I love what he brings. Tanner Connor has looked impressive when he's been healthy during preseason. And you can't gloss over Hayden Rucci because Hayden Rucci has been one of the most productive players on the Dolphins offense through preseason. Yeah. And so when I look at this room and I'm like, man, which one am I keeping as the 4th tight end? Because I think they keep 4 tight ends. I don't think it's Rucci because he's a great blocker. He's not as gifted as a receiver. And
he's also the one to me that has the least amount of opportunity to be picked up by another team.
Yeah, I think that he's probably the guy who, and I think this is the case for a lot of UDFAs because I'm sure we'll get to the defensive side of the ball, particularly in the defensive back room, and talk about UDFAs who are very good football players. The thing about keeping UDFAs is we also have to remember that 32 NFL teams probably did not have a draftable grade on the guy. Because if they had a draftable grade, they would have picked him in the 7th round. And so, I don't care what Mike McDaniel and Chris Grier tell me after the draft, that they loved Grayson Murphy and they had a draftable grade on him. No, you did not. You would have picked him in the 7th round. Next question. So, to some degree, I think that you can keep a lot of these guys, or at least most of them, just off of the idea that, no team thought they were draftable players. They went 200 and whatever it is, 56 picks or 260 or whatever it is, or whatever it was last year's draft, and no team called them to draft them. And they had to go to UDFA and they had to get signed by a team. And so Rucci is the one that gets put on the practice squad, I think, without a doubt. I don't think a team is taking a chance on him as their tight end 4. And if they do, you know what, man? Be my guest. If you want to give him that chance to be the tight end 4 on your roster, go ahead.
Good for him. I'm happy for him.
I'm happy for him. We can find Hayden Rucci again in free agency. Tanner Connor still can't block for jack, right? He's not a very good blocker, but he's an incredibly explosive receiver.
So he's the type of guy that if you have to decide whether you're keeping a 4th tight end or a 6th wide receiver, you're kind of keeping him in that role.
You're kind of I think he could probably play in the slot if you really needed him to, kind of like Mike Gesicki did in Miami, right? And so I think that if you're keeping either a wide receiver 6 or a tight end 4, you're keeping him. Jody Fortson, I think a lot of people, I'm excited about what he can bring to a team. I think he's an incredibly talented football player. I just don't see the way that he gets put on this 53-man roster unless he's performing incredibly well in training camp when we don't see it. Because I don't think the production's been there yet.
Yeah. I think it's going to be interesting. Do you think, as we're transitioning back to the receiver room, that Odell is on the roster or on PUP week 1?
Ooh. I would say he's on the roster. I've been operating under the belief that he's on the roster for week one. I think that Odell is a guy who does not need practice. He
I
does
agree.
not need training camp, guys. Like, we can get worried
agree.
about the fact that him, Teron Armstead, Jalen Waddle have not been practicing. I don't care if Jalen Waddle is practicing. I don't
Okay.
care. And so, like, if OBJ's ready for week one, he's on the roster. I've been operating under the belief that he's on the roster. Because all the comments are very like, he may not be ready, but he probably will be ready. Like, if we're reading between the lines of what Mike McDaniel has said, it seems like he'd be ready for week one, which I guess is now 2 weeks away. So we'll see, but I think he is probably on the 53-man roster when cuts happen.
So to me, I think Craig Kraft starts on PUP, and I think his injury is going to take him down a little while.
He'll be an IR, yeah.
Yeah, I think the 4 guys that I see as locks to make the roster are obviously Tyreek Waddle, Odell, and Malik Washington.
Yes.
I think those are the 4. And then if you're going to keep 5, is it Berrios or Izukama? And if you're going to keep 6, it's both of them, I guess, until Craig Kraft comes back.
If it's 5, I think it's Berrios because he's the special teamer, he's the vet, he's reliable. I love the explosiveness of Azukama, but he's never been able to stay healthy, and you can never rely on him to play an entire game. So, like, those are the tough decisions that you have to make as a coach, right? Is that, like, you can love the potential of a player, but if he cannot play on Sundays, that potential does not matter. And Braxton Berrios, as I guess whatever as he is, right? Like, he's not a very flashy player. I know a lot of people are frustrated that he fair catches, it seems like, every single punt in an NFL football game. And as a special teams lover, it pisses me off more than it pisses you off, because I want you to take a chance, man. I want you to take a chance, man. Let's go see what happens. And it's like, fair catch at the 20. Good enough for me.
It's like Ted Ginn running out of bounds, but instead it's fair catches.
And look, I will take a fair catch over a guy. What's the other option? The other option is always the guy fumbling the ball and you losing the ball on every play. I've watched enough Miami Hurricanes games to see what that feels like. So I'm glad he fair catches and actually finishes the fair catch. But I would also love for that man to take a chance at once and try and see if he can make a play on it. But he can return punts. He can play other special teams roles, I guess. He's a reliable slot receiver. He's a guy who makes the 53-man roster as the 5th wide receiver or 4th wide receiver.
Yeah, I think right now, at least until Craig Kraft comes back, I think we keep 5. I think we keep Hill, Waddle, OBJ, Washington, and Berrios. And I think Izukama gets cut.
I think I had them keeping 6. So I guess I had them keeping I guess I can pull it up, and I probably should pull it up because this feels like an important discussion point for, talking about a football team and, talking about 53-man roster.
And you already have the notes, so you don't have to use your brain.
Yeah.
You already made it.
I already made it. Yeah, I had them keeping 6. I had them keeping Hill, Waddle, Beckham, Ezukanma, Berrios, and Washington, and then I had Craig Kraft on IR.
So do you have them keeping 3 tight ends or 4?
I have them keeping 3 tight ends. So I have them keeping Smith, Smythe, and Hill. And then I think they just practice Squadrucci and maybe Connor. And then you would just elevate them as needed.
Yeah.
If you need the extra tight end in a week.
See, I have 5 receivers, 4 tight ends. So I think that's a spot where the Dolphins, it's really one of those, you have to be behind closed doors to know what the decision is going to be on Tuesday.
So for context, I had him keeping 4 running backs, 6 wide receivers, and 3 tight ends. So I went 4 running backs, 6 wide receivers. I guess you could go 4 tight ends, 3 running backs, and I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah. How many offensive linemen do you have them keeping?
I have them keeping 9 in total with Isaiah Wynn starting on PUP.
Okay. So we have the same. Let's see if we have the same 8, not counting Wynn. I have Armstead, Jackson.
Oh no! I have 9, and then Win as well. So 10 total, but 9 on the 53 for week 1.
Okay, so I have Armstead, Jackson, Paul, Lamb, Brewer, Cotton, Ike, Jones, and Mayer on the practice squad.
I have the same exact 8. And then I have Jack Driscoll as well, which I
Oh,
know that like the clip is going viral of him getting his ass kicked by Vita Vea. But like also, guys, Vita Vea has kicked every
yeah.
offensive lineman's ass for 5 years. Are we shocked he's doing it now too? Like,
And I'm not gonna lie, I just had a brain fart and didn't put Driscoll on. It wasn't for any specific reason, so I did just add Driscoll to my list. So now we're up to
9.
um,
So
we're up to 9, and that is the 53rd player on my roster.
so here's the thing about Mayer, and I love everyone loves Mayer. I don't know how you pronounce his last name in particular, but everyone loves him, and he's played really well in preseason. Let's get this out the way. He's been incredibly impressive in preseason. The only reason why I don't see him making the 53-man roster is because there is not as much positional versatility with a guy like him compared to Lester Cotton, who I think is the guy he's directly competing with.
See, now I think Mayer's the type of guy that if something happened to Aaron Brewer, I could see Mayer starting a game over a guy like Cotton at center.
Yes.
But I think you put Mayer on the practice squad because in game you need a guy who can do multiple things.
Yes, and the thing is, like, if Brewer gets hurt mid-game, I know no one likes this solution.
I know what you're going to say.
Liam Eichenberg snaps. Jack Driscoll snaps. These guys snap. They are your backup centers.
They don't snap well.
I don't give a shit. I don't care.
They don't snap well.
I know everyone wants to go, why isn't Cooper Beebe on the Miami Dolphins or whatever the next hot button issue is? Because God, guys, you loved every offensive lineman in this draft, didn't you?
I love anybody that can get the ball from the center to the quarterback and then not fall over when trying to block the guy in front of him.
Like, I think that, like, if you get to a point in the middle of a game where Aaron Brewer gets hurt, God forbid, and you've got to shift the line, we've seen them win games with Liam Eichenberg at center. It has not been pretty. Liam Eichenberg is not a good football player, but he's played center before. And so, like, if I need to go a half with Liam Eichenberg at center, I can go a half with Liam Eichenberg at center. I will hate the entire existence of that half. Let's be clear. I will not have fun watching it, but I will live with it.
I want Mr. S to just clip the little bit where you said Liam Eichenberg is not a good football player. I mean, we're making like an opening song, an opening video for the show. I think that should be one of the audio clips that is in the opening video.
I don't think I'm saying anything shocking when I say that Liam Eichenberg might not be a very good football player. So, like, clip it. I don't care. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is the year and he all puts it together like Austin Jackson did. Because Austin Jackson, like, let's be clear, is a very good football player. Everyone should be deleting their tweets now because I think that he's an actual long-term starter at right tackle. But Liam Eichenberg is not a long-term starter at any position, and it looks like he might be your starting right guard. Oops.
All right, let's now, before we get depressed, shift over the defensive side of the ball. I have them keeping 6 defensive tackles.
I have 6 as well.
I have Sealer, Campbell, Benito Jones, Peely, Hand, and Gallimore.
I have the exact same 6.
I think that Jonathan Harris and Isaiah Mack both have a case. I think the other 6 have just played better. And I think that our defensive line is very, very deep. And what I said, I think it was on either last week's show or 2 weeks ago, what I like about that group is you have grown men in the room.
Yes.
You have a bunch of grown men that are going to put their heads down, that are going to do the dirty work. And that's what you need to do in this type of defense.
My only question mark here, and this is not a popular answer because Brandon Peely has looked really good, is do they keep 2 nose tackles? Because Peely and Benito Jones cannot move outside. And guys like Calais Campbell and Neville Gallimore can move inside if you really needed them to. I think you have to reward Brandon Peely for the way he's played.
I agree.
And I think that you have the spots on the roster to reward him at least early on in the year. If it gets to a point where, you need to replace someone because, you have I don't know, like a linebacker get hurt and you need to add a linebacker, you probably end up cutting someone from that room. But as of now, I think you have to reward everyone in that room because they've all either looked good in preseason or they're established players, right? So uh, I think that I love the way that room is built. I think that room is a very solid room. And in terms of finding a way to replace the production of Christian Wilkins, that room's going to be able to do it to some degree. And I would love to have Christian Wilkins in that room, but if I was in a situation where obviously Christian Wilkins is no longer in Miami, I feel confident with the way that room is assembled.
Yeah, and I think that as we shift to other parts of the defense, I think the common trend that we're going to talk about is how deep the back end of this roster
It
is.
is so deep.
It's crazy to think about the change from a couple of years ago when it was all essentially undrafted guys at the end of the roster, and now it's veterans that you're cutting because this roster is so deep. Moving to the edge, I have both Cameron Good and Chubb starting on IR. And I have 5 guys making the active roster.
I think we have the same 5.
I have Phillips, Chop, Agba, Kamara, and Bell.
Yes, same exact 5. I didn't put Cam Good on the IR pup. I think that they'll just keep him on there though because he's a good special teamer and he's played well in times with Miami. So I didn't have him on the pup listed, but yeah, he would be on the pup as well. And Chubb, if he's not ready for week 1, is on pup or IR. And then when he comes back, you would end up cutting, I think, whoever the 5th guy in that room is.
And I think there's a chance that that's a situation where you move a guy like Tilly or Neville Gallimore and then move Agba down to that defensive line room and keep those guys. If Quentin Bell is playing well and you don't want to move around a guy like Kamara or Agba is still playing the way he's playing. But I do think if you're cutting somebody from that edge room, that Agba's the first one to go. I think
Really?
Quentin Bell. I think Quentin
Bell's the last one in that room. I think he's the edge 5 in that room.
Interesting.
So my thing with Agba is, I think we all know what Agba is at this point. He's been in Miami for 3-4 years at this point. He's played under multiple coaches, right? But I think there is still some positional flexibility in the sense that, like, if he had to line up hand in the dirt and play as a defensive end, he's done it before. It's not always been pretty, but he's done that before. So
out of the 11 guys that we have between edge and defensive tackle, he's the guy I trust the most to flip rooms.
Yes, he's the guy who I think is the most capable of flipping rooms. At least for more than like a snap, because Bradley Chubb can play inside on a pass rushing down. Jalen Phillips can play inside on a pass rushing down. You're not playing. I don't want to see Jalen Phillips lined up against an offensive guard on 1st and 10. I don't want to ever see it. If I ever see that, I want Anthony Weaver fired tomorrow for ever thinking that's a good idea. And it won't ever happen. So I think we're good there. But like, I like Agba's flexibility. I think he is a proven commodity. And with how good the Dolphins are probably going to be this year, I think they still need some proven commodity as depth pieces.
I agree. Inside linebacker is going to be interesting because I think they only have room to keep 4.
Yeah.
And I think that obviously Jordan Brooks and David Long are locks. So you're looking to essentially keep 2 of Tyndall, Anthony Walker, and Duke Riley.
Yeah.
I have Channing Tyndall and Anthony Walker. However, I've never been a Duke Riley fan, and I think that I'm one of the lowest people on what I think of Duke Riley. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if they end up keeping him.
So here's my thing. Duke Riley is not a very good defensive linebacker. If he was your linebacker 3, I'd be a little bit more concerned. As the linebacker 4 in that room, I think he is a good enough special teamer where he has to be on the roster, which is going to piss some people off. I know that there are going to be people who don't like that answer because they all saw what happened in week 18 against Buffalo.
Yeah.
They all saw the highlights. They all saw the clips. And so I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I would feel comfortable with him playing more than a few snaps on defense throughout the year. I think you still have to be able to play defense, but he is good on special teams. He's really talented on special teams. I don't know if Tyndall can do it. And I think that the bigger question would be, is it Anthony Walker or Channing Tyndall? I would lean Anthony Walker. I wouldn't be shocked with any answer, though. That is one of those rooms where, of the 5 guys, I would love to keep all 5. I would love to find a way to keep Channing Tyndall on the roster, but I don't think there's a way to keep Channing Tyndall on this roster unless you're willing to make sacrifices at the positions we're going to talk about next. And I'm not comfortable in saying they're going to make those tough decisions, or they're comfortable making those tough decisions.
Well, you either have to keep 5 corners or 3 safeties, which I don't think we're going to pick either of those options.
No.
Or you only keep a 5th defensive tackle. And to me, because it's those 3 defensive line spots, I would rather keep the 2nd nose tackle than keep the 5th inside linebacker.
I would rather – this is not the best way to think about it. I would rather reward Brandon Peely for the way he played than reward Channing Tyndall for the way he played. And so I guess for context, I have Brooks Brooks Long. How did I forget Jordan or Long's name? David Long's name. I have Brooks, Long, Walker, and Riley. And then I have Tyndall.
I have Brooks, Long, Walker, and Tyndall.
I would love to keep Tyndall on the practice squad if that's an option. I don't know if he's willing to go do that in Miami. But, I think that I would rather reward Brandon Peely than I would Channing Tyndall, because I think Brandon Peely deserves to be on the 53-man roster of the Miami Dolphins. And so if it comes down to one of those 2 guys, and that's the last decision you have to make on a 53-man roster, keep the extra nose tackle, even if it doesn't, I guess, make the most sense versatility-wise.
And here's where really probably the most difficult conversation is going to have to take place, the secondary, because we have a really, really deep secondary. When it comes, we'll start with the cornerbacks. I think the 4 guys that are locks, and the 4th may surprise people, but I have Jalen Ramsey, Jordan Fuller, or Kendall Fuller, or whichever Fuller or
Kendall. It's Kendall Fuller.
Kendall, Jordan Poyer, Kendall Fuller, Jordan Fuller. It's late. Ethan Bonner and Ciaran Neal. I have as the 4th lock.
You have Ethan Bonner as a lock over Kader Kohou? That's interesting.
And you're gonna not like what I say even more next. I think
I'm gonna hate it.
I think that the 5th guy that I see getting in there is Nick Needham.
Gross.
I thought that Kader Kohou had a horrible preseason. What worries me and why I think we're going to end up keeping him is I don't know if we trust anybody else to play the nickel. I think that that's going to be what gets him on the roster. I do think Cam Smith starts the season on either PUP or IR, and he's not able to play week 1. I think that'll be more of a strategic thing. But I think that 6th spot is going to be a battle between Kohou, Isaiah Johnson, and Storm Duck. And I wouldn't be surprised, as Mr. S just alluded to on Twitter, if Kader Kohou's a guy that we move for a mid-round pick.
I think Kader Kohou is better than people give him credit for. And I understand that last year it did not go well when he's lined up against some of the best wide receivers in football.
No, he's specifically a nickel.
Guys, I don't know how else to say this, and I don't want to sound condescending. If your biggest issue with a player is that he can't defend the best wide receivers in football, just simply don't put him on the best wide receivers in football. I know sometimes it gets to a situation where he has to be put on Stephon Diggs 2 years ago, I guess it was now, or at player Y or player X or whatever, right? But just don't do that often. And so I think that he is a reliable nickel corner who does his role. He's tackled well in the past, whether it's consistent or not, right? He is a nickel corner who has played well in the past. I think he's probably a better fit for a man defense than a zone defense. But I think that the biggest issue last season was that he was trying to transition from a scheme he's played his entire life, because Texas A&M Commerce played a lot of press man, played a lot of man coverage, and he was put into a situation with Brian Flores and God, who was the defensive coordinator there? I'm losing Boyer, Josh Boyer. God, I hate that man. God will never
happy to
let that.
forget his name.
God would never let that man see heaven. But I like that was a defense he was incredibly familiar with, which is why I think his rookie year was so promising. Then you go out and you hire Vic Fangio, who did not run anywhere close to the same defense, right? And I don't know if it was trying to transition. So my biggest issue is I don't know if it's he couldn't transition to that defense or he can't play that defense. Because if he can't play that defense, don't put him on the 53-man roster because you're still going to have to play zone defense. You're going to play a lot of zone defense with Anthony Weaver. If it's that he was transitioning and he was put into a shitty situation, excuse my language, with a defensive coordinator who didn't really fit him, I feel a lot more comfortable with him playing the nickel than Nick Needham. And effectively, I think the guy you're keeping there has to be able to play the nickel because Jalen Ramsey's not playing the nickel all season. He's going to play the nickel at times. He's going to play all over the field, I think. But he's not playing the nickel as a true dedicated nickel. So you have to find someone who can play the nickel. I feel a lot more confident with Kader Kohut than I do Nick Needham.
Yeah, and I think that we have to mention the 3 undrafted guys, Storm Duck, Isaiah Johnson, and Jason Mitri, because all 3 of them have had a really, really good preseason.
They all impressed, and I have none of them on my 53-man roster.
I think all 3 of them have a chance to make the practice squad. And I think that I really like Isaiah Johnson's size. And I wouldn't be surprised if one of those guys end up making the team over Kohut or even I know a lot of people don't like Needham, but I thought Needham's kind of had a bounce back preseason.
I would love to put Nick Needham on the practice squad. I don't think it's possible. But I would love to. I would love to see him with a year of being able to get healthy and get back into the groove of things and see if we can return the form that he had a year ago. And if that's something he's willing to do, and he doesn't go, I think he's still waiver eligible. So if he doesn't go claimed, that's something I'd love to see. To the same degree, I feel like there's probably a chance you lose one of these undrafted free agents. I don't think there's a way you keep all 3 on the practice squad.
No.
And it's going to suck when Storm Duck, Isaiah Johnson, or Mitri gets claimed by someone. It's going to hurt. You are going to be pissed off that they didn't find a way to keep him. I will say I had 6 corners being kept. I had Ramsey, Fuller, Kohut, Smith, because I don't think they put him on IR. I guess they could play the funny games of keeping him on IR for 4 weeks and returning him. I had Saron Neal as your special teamer, and then I had Ethan Bonner because he's looked so good in camp. And it's going to hurt when Storm Duck, Isaiah Johnson, or Mitri gets claimed. But I will also say that you are damn lucky that you found 3 guys who we are sitting here on August 24th, and they are not all afterthoughts because, man, that's impressive to go find 3 undrafted free agent corners and all of them to impress enough to be at least to some degree good enough to be on an NFL roster. That's damn impressive. The Dolphins 3 years ago, 4 years ago, all 3 of them would have made the roster.
For sure.
We're not in that position anymore. Whether you like that or not, I don't know. But we're not in a position where you can keep 3 of them.
Can you read me really quickly your 6 corners again?
Yes, I had Ramsey, Fuller, Kohut. I had Cam Smith. I had Saron Neal. I had Ethan Bonner.
So you have Nick Needham not making the team.
I do not have Nick Needham making the team.
Interesting. And I think that that's another spot where we could try to get a 6th or 7th round pick for a guy like Nick Needham.
Again, I say this because I love what Nick Needham brings. Also, I realize that I think I have 54 guys on my roster. That's amazing. Welcome to trying to change the roster at 11 p.m. The night before we record this show. So I guess for context, remove Chris Brooks. We're keeping 3 running backs, and I'm keeping everyone on defense because I think everyone on defense stays. But
I agree.
I can't believe I did that. That's hilarious. So I don't know if you can trade Nick Needham. I I would love to be able to like sit here and go, man, Minnesota has a need at corner. Maybe you get a 7th for him. Maybe you get a 6th for him. I just think that the injury history is going to be too much for teams to be like to keep or to like trade a pick for. Maybe it's like the 6-7 pick swap nonsense that teams do. And it's like, man, you get a 6th and you give up a 7th or something. But it's so tough with him because I love what Nick Needham brings to a roster. And he's looked really good in camp. But I just can't feasibly keep him with the injury because I don't think he's still 100% fit to play an NFL game. And that's the toughest thing I had to say on this episode because I love Nick Needham. And the story of getting an undrafted guy and him turning into a really good football player and finding a way to make the active roster as much as he did is awesome. But it's also the toughest situation of like, he may have looked good, but you have so many corners on this team who are good, or so many corners who are going to be on the roster. And I don't know. I think that, like, again, I'd love to find a way to keep him or keep Storm Duck on the roster, or I'm trying to think of who else could even be in this room. Like, I guess Isaiah Johnson would be the guy I'd like to keep as well, but I don't think you can keep them because I don't think you're keeping 7 corners on a roster for more than like 2 weeks if you're just trying to keep them on the roster long enough to then get them onto the practice squad.
Yeah, and I think to cap us off, because I know we both have 3 special teams guys, I have 4 safeties. I think the obvious ones are Holland, Poyer, and McMorris.
Yes. No.
I have Elijah Campbell making the team over Marcus May.
I have Elijah Campbell as a lock because he's so good at special teams.
I agree. But I have McMorris making the team over Marcus May.
I have May over McMorris. I have the other 3. I have Campbell, Holland, Poyer, and then May. The only reason I take May over McMorris is because I think the guy who you keep has to be your safety 3. I feel a little bit more comfortable starting the season with Marcus May as your safety 3. And I think Patrick McMorris, because the athletic skill set is not very good for him. He's like not super athletic. He plays like a chicken with his head cut off. He plays at 150 miles all the time. And I love that. But I think that with the injury and the injury doesn't seem to be serious. But like with the injury, with his athletic profile, I think he's a guy who you can put on the practice squad. And with that being the case, I think Marcus May stays on the roster as the vet safety 3 if something happens to Poyer or Holland. Excuse me.
Well, if something happens to Poyer or Holland, we might be talking about starting Ramsey at safety for a game. Or starting Fuller at safety for a game.
I think they would just I mean, I think that they trust Elijah Campbell. And last year, everyone remembers Elijah Campbell having to play against God, who was it?
It was rough, is what it was.
Oh my God, it was against the Titans. It was the one game I want to forget. It was the game against the Titans that he had to play. And he was like responsible for a lot of those like plays at the end of the game that were ugly. Again, I think some of that is just like he probably wasn't that good of a fit for Vic Fangio because the safeties.
I don't know if anybody was a very good fit for Vic Fangio.
I don't know if anyone like exceeded expectations in that defense last year, which is a deeply concerning thought to say, given that like they made the playoffs with that defensive coordinator, by the way, guys. Like they did not have a single guy exceed expectations in that room or on that defense, and they still made the playoffs.
And now they're adding a defensive coordinator who I think will be a head coach within 2 seasons.
I don't even know if I think it'll be a season.
2 is thinking kindly.
2 is like if 2 would be like if New Orleans calls and he doesn't want to go replace Dennis Allen in New Orleans, right? And he's like, man, you know what? I'll just run it back for a year. But I think that like I love Patrick McMorris. I've been saying from the rooftops that Patrick McMorris is an NFL player, and he was on my 53-man roster projection up until last night. He is the 54th player. If I have to build a 53-man roster, he's number 54. I just think the issue is you're not keeping 5. And if you're not keeping 5, you're making a tough cut. So it's, do you think you can sneak McMorris onto the practice squad? Or do you feel more comfortable with him on the active roster and you having to find another practice squad safety? And I know that they've had a few guys at the bottom of the roster impress throughout the late quarters of preseason games, so maybe it's one of them. But man, I hate this. I hated building this 53-man roster. I hated it.
And that's the 53, and we just both made 53. Well, you made 54.
I made 54 that I had to adjust an hour into a podcast because I clearly planned.
And now, an hour and 5 minutes in, I'm asking you, are we going to add anybody else outside of this team? I mean, you could the 3 positions to me that if we were going to add somebody makes sense is a backup quarterback. If we don't think White or Skyler are it, I think we could add another offensive lineman, another guard center type player. I know Mr. S wants me to read his list of offensive linemen the Dolphins could get. And then I could see us possibly adding a receiver if Odell isn't ready, if Craig Kraft has to start the season on IR. I could see us go that direction. But do you think that the Dolphins could add any of these offensive linemen? Ben Powers, this would be via trade. Ben Powers of the Broncos, Dylan Parham of the Raiders, James Daniels of the Steelers, Cody Ford of the Bengals, Ben Cleveland of the Ravens, Andre Dillard of the Packers, Ryan Bates of the Bears, Dalton Risner of the Vikings, who I think we should give up on, Evan Neal of the Giants, and then Matt Hennessy of the Eagles.
The year is 2055, and we're still talking about Dalton Risner being a Dolphin. It's not happening, guys. Just drop it.
Not happening.
Dylan Parham, I think, probably starts in Vegas, so he's probably not an option. Then you have who's the guy in Pittsburgh? James Daniels. James Daniels. I don't know if he starts because I know they like Mason McMorrick. God, what's his last name? McMorrick or whatever. McCormick.
Yes.
I think they like him a lot, but I think that he probably has to play center to start the year because Zach Frazier got hurt in the preseason. Again, I think he's probably a guy who's starting in Pittsburgh. I'm losing my mind. This is amazing. Then you have Ben Powers, who maybe isn't starting because I know that they signed a few guys and they've got a few guys in that room who are decent football players. So maybe he's a guy who you can trade something for if you really have to. I don't know if I want anyone from that Baltimore Ravens offensive line. I was looking at that yesterday. I don't know if I want anyone from that room. I don't think Ben Cleveland starts, and so maybe you get him, or maybe he's the swing guard there, and you can't trade for a swing guard in the NFL because there aren't enough good swing guards in the NFL. So here's my only issue with this, right? Is all these guys may not be starters for their football teams. 75% of them are almost certainly going to be the backup guard for those football teams. And we are not in an era of the NFL where there are enough good guards where teams are trading their third guard. I don't think if a team offered the Miami Dolphins something for whoever you think is the third guard on the roster, whether it's Driscoll or Eichenberg, because it's probably going to be one of those, I don't think they'd trade a pick for one of those because there's not enough good guard play in the NFL. And so this is the inherent issue with guard play, right? Is like you can probably go out there and you can probably go get Jackson Carman. He was just cut. It's not very good.
Not good.
You can go get him if you want. If you want to take a chance on a guy who was picked in the second round, sure, man. Go do it. Go. The world is your oyster if that's what you really want to do. Yeah. I guess the only way I can see it happening is if one of these guys lose the second spot and they're now the fourth guard. maybe you can trade a fifth or a fourth for them and get them. I don't think like guard play is not a position where you can trade a sixth or a seventh and get anyone worth a damn. I would say keep going and keep trying to find whoever you can get to fix that room. Because I mean they've done it before. They've gotten like Brandon Shell off of free agency, and he looked pretty good for a few weeks. I think you need one guard. Like in a perfect world, I would say you need a guard to fill out this offensive line room. But my biggest concern is I don't think you can find a guard in free agency or through trade that fixes that room. And so I think the biggest thing would be you almost have to hope Isaiah Wynn is healthy at any point in this season. Because if Isaiah Wynn is healthy, that room suddenly looks a lot better than we want to give it credit for.
Yeah.
Because Isaiah Wynn will play left guard, you'll move Robert Jones over to right guard, and I am going to be singing Robert Jones praise all season long. I don't give a crap. I don't give a damn. But to answer your question of do I think that they add a guy into that room or any room, like who are we signing? Who's the vet guy who we're signing? Because I think that you're probably not just keeping 53 guys from your roster, because guys get cut who you like and who you probably had good grades on or good scouting reports on. Could definitely see a wide receiver, because I don't like the biggest question mark is OBJ. And if OBJ is not healthy, I'm not keeping Jaquan Burton. I'm not keeping whoever caught that touchdown pass from Skylar Thompson in the fourth quarter of a preseason game. Because I know it was someone. I don't remember who it was. McRath or something?
McGowan, was that who it was?
McCowan or something like that.
Tyreek McGowan.
Yeah, sure. That's a name. I'm not keeping him on a 53-man roster. I'm not keeping Jaquan Burton. Very serviceable as a backup running back for 2 plays in a football game. That was funny when we had to do that. But like, none of the wide receivers on the roster have impressed enough to be put on a 53-man roster. So I would say maybe you go out, you get a vet for that room. If there's a guy you like, I think they probably just run with who they got at quarterback. You don't need a running back or a tight end. Defensively, I could see him adding another defensive tackle. If a guy gets cut, that's like not so much shocking, but interesting, right? Like maybe there's a guy who gets cut somewhere that you can go out and take a chance on. I guess I can't believe I said stop talking about Dalton Risner. If there's an offensive guard who's going to be getting cut or traded, it's probably Dalton Risner, because I don't think he's starting in Minnesota. And so like I may have said earlier, like, man, stop talking about it. It's 2024. We don't need to keep talking about it.
2055 is going to come real quick.
Yeah, 2055s came in the next 2 minutes, because I know I don't think Dalton Risner is very good. Like, let's be 100% clear. I don't think Dalton Risner is good, but I think they probably need another tight end or offensive guard, and Dalton Risner's available, and he looked good at points last season. And so, like, sure, man, give him a contract. He's played an offense similar in Minnesota. Let's take a chance and see what we got there. Maybe he's serviceable, which is all they need. They need serviceable.
Serviceable.
So, like, yeah, I think that like offensive guard's probably your best bet outside of receiver. I can't see him adding another safety or corner. Maybe a linebacker if someone gets cut, but again, I don't see anyone getting cut there. So, like, I could see defensive line, I could see offensive guard, and that's like about it in terms of guys you're adding.
Yeah. And so I did have the second half of this episode was supposed to be a college football preview, but we went an hour and 15 minutes on the Dolphins. So I'm going to give you 3 rapid fire college football questions. First.
Amazing, because I have college football on my other monitor, and it's FCS football. I'm watching North Alabama SEMO. So,
for percentage chance 0 to 100 that UCF wins the Big 12.
35.
35.
The Big 12 is incredibly talented and incredibly deep. I don't think they're a top 4 team in the Big 12 right now, but it would not shock me if all the pieces come together on that roster
Yeah.
because they have a lot of talent. I love RJ Harvey at running back. KJ Jefferson is my little sweet prince. I can't quit him. Gus Malzahn is a great coach. And so it would not shock me if they are in that mix. But I love Kansas State. I love Utah. I love Oklahoma State. I really like what like Texas Tech and Kansas can offer. So I don't know. 35 might be a little high, but I do like what UCF has on that roster.
Yeah, and I think that Kansas is a team that is going to sneak up on people a lot like they did the last couple of years because I think their schedule sets up nicely for them to kind of peak at the right time. And I do think that they're going to be
health is the biggest question mark there, though. And so Jalen Daniels has been hurt every year the last 2 years. And so I don't know if
they don't have Jason Bean to fall back on.
Yeah, they don't have Jason Bean to go bullshit his way to 8 wins, right? And so, like, if Jalen Daniels stays healthy, that offense is incredibly good. And there's so much talent on that offense. But I don't know if he stays healthy. So I'm so hesitant on picking them to do anything meaningful just because I don't know how healthy he stays.
So, and just know before you answer these next 2 questions that when you say your answer, there are 112 people that are going to go place bets on the next 2 words you say.
Don't do that.
So
don't do that.
For the responsible people, 112 that are listening, who does Kevin Fielder have winning the Heisman? And who does Kevin Fielder have winning the national championship?
I knew these were the 2 questions. I'm going to start with Heisman Trophy. Geez.
You knew the questions were coming.
I know the questions are coming, and I'm never prepared to answer a question about who wins the Heisman Trophy because, okay, first of all, I think it's quarterback. I don't think we get a running back or a wide receiver winning it, whether they would deserve to or not. I think it's quarterback. Dylan Gabriel is like the popular pick amongst people. I don't think it's Dylan Gabriel
because I don't have. Is a UCF fan.
I don't have Oregon winning the Big Ten, so I don't think he wins it. Carson Beck, I guess, could be the popular answer, but I don't know if he does enough for Georgia to win it. My name is going to be Jalen Milroe because I think what he did last season carries over with Kalen DeBoer as head coach, with the talent they have on that offense, whether it comes together or not. Like, there is so much talent on that offense. He's coached by one of the best quarterback developers in football. Give me Jalen Milroe, and I don't know like what his odds are, but I think he's a very good bet to win Heisman. If we're
Jalen Milroe on the FanDuel sports app right now is plus 1,400. That is really according to VegasInsider.com.
That is very good. I would absolutely take those odds over. I guess like Quinn Ewers, Carson Beck, Dylan Gabriel.
Yeah, the top 3 right now are Dylan Gabriel at plus 500, Carson Beck at plus 800, and Quinn Ewers at plus 1,200.
If you think one of those teams wins the SEC because of their quarterback play, then take whoever, or wins their conference because of their quarterback play, then take that guy. But I don't have any of them winning the conference because of quarterback play. I'll be honest, I have Georgia winning the SEC. It won't be because of Carson Beck. It'll be because of that defense and the weapons around him. So give me Jalen Milroe. I like what he brings. I think that he's like the quintessential, he's going to make Heisman moments. And I think he wins the Heisman. I think he's the best bet to win Heisman. But this is such a tough year to pick who wins the Heisman because there's no like clear answer. There's so many guys who might win it, but I also like have just doubts about their chances. And the national champion, it won't be anyone in the ACC. It won't be Florida State, Clemson, Miami.
Well, after today,
it definitely won't be FSU. I don't think it's Clemson. I don't think it's Miami. So we can eliminate the ACC. I don't think the Big 12's got enough talent to win. I was just talking about the Big 12 as one of the top, like one of the most fun conferences in football. I don't think they've got the talent to win the national championship. So it's going to come down to the SEC or the Big 10. Georgia is the popular pick amongst everyone, and they're always the popular pick because of how good they are. Kirby Smart can't keep getting away with it, I say, as he keeps getting away with it. Texas maybe, but they've lost 2 running backs. They're gonna have to transition. I don't know if they transition well enough to win the national championship. I can't believe I'm about to say this because I'm going to get proven wrong. And do not bet on this because I am not confident enough on this. I think Ohio State wins the national championship this year.
It makes me so sick, but so do I.
It makes me sick because I know I'm wrong. I know they're going to find a way to lose to a team they don't deserve to lose to.
They have the best running back room in college football.
They have the best running back room in college football. They have one of the best wide receiver rooms in college football. If that defense can just be good enough, like the offense will lead you to a national championship with Trayvon Henderson, Quinshawn Judkins. You have Jeremiah Smith. You have Egbuka. You've got so many wide receivers in that room who are talented football players. Will Howard is not a elite quarterback by any stretch, but I think the last few years have proven that you don't need an elite quarterback to win the national championship. You just need one who's good enough. And Will Howard is probably good enough with the talent you have put around him to win you a national championship. So if Chip Kelly's good enough as an offensive coordinator, which I think he is, I think this is where he wants to be. This is what he wants to do. If Chip Kelly's good enough as an offensive coordinator and Ryan Day gets out of his own way, they win a national championship. And I think I feel most confident about them because I have doubts about Georgia, which I can't believe I said that. I have some very minor doubts about Georgia. Also, I just don't want to pick Georgia. I just don't want to do it. Just not going to do it. You can't make me pick Georgia.
I'm not.
Oregon, I have doubts about. Michigan is probably not good enough to win a national championship again. Then you have like Alabama, Texas, Tennessee, who are all really good football teams, but I don't think they're national championship good. I think they're just good college football teams. And I don't know if a good college football team is winning the national championship this year because I think the playoff is going to be just a complete and utter chaotic mess this year. And so I'm going to give my money. If I had to place bets, I do not gamble on college football. I barely gamble, period, because I lose way too much money doing so. I would put my money on Ohio State, but I would not be a confident putting money on Ohio State.
So my favorite to win the national championship is Ohio State. I think the two, if I'm putting two sleepers out there on teams who I think could make a little bit of noise, I think Notre Dame's a team that can make some noise this year.
Yeah, I like that roster a lot.
I like Riley Leonard a lot, and I think that they have a very good chance in a 12-team playoff to get in and have favorable positioning that can find themselves a couple wins away, even though they'll probably get blown out in their last opportunity. And then another under-the-radar team, two of them. I love Missouri. I was a big fan of Missouri last year, and I talked about them a lot on our picks previews. And Ole Miss is another team that I think can make a lot of noise. Both of them, both Missouri and Ole Miss, have probably two of the better rosters in their school's history, both led by Brady Cook and Jackson Dart, who are my two sleeper Heisman picks. I think that if you're looking for guys way, way down there that can make noise, you're looking for a quarterback on a top team, Jackson Dart, Brady Cook could be those guys.
I would take Luther Burden if I was picking a Heisman.
Oh, that's such a great pick.
If I had to take a dark horse on a team like that, it would be Luther Burden because I think that's how you make a deep run, right? I just pulled up the odds. The only reason why I'm not going to say Ole Miss is because I don't know if Lane Kiffin can do it. I think Lane Kiffin is a very good football coach. Is he good enough to win you a national championship? Because that's what he's got to be. He's got to be good enough to win you a national championship. And I was talking with someone about it earlier. Until he proves he's not this, he is James Franklin. He is good enough to win you 10 games. He's not good enough to win you a national championship yet. Same reason I'm not picking Penn State, by the way. Because James Franklin's good enough to win you 10 games. He's not good enough to win you a national championship. I'm looking at the list right now. Deep sleeper, right? And I'm considering anyone who has plus 2,000 odds or I guess worse, I guess is probably the way to explain it. Uh, I like Missouri. They're really low. I think that they have the talent to do it, and this is their best chance of doing so.
For sure.
Uh, the best sleeper I've got though is Tennessee because I think that roster is incredibly talented. Josh Heupel's a great football coach.
Oh, stop it!
He is.
UCF fans were thrilled that Tennessee took Josh.
Yeah, of course they were because UCF fans have these, and I don't want to get into this conversation because
boy,
I am
here we
trying.
go.
I am trying to grow as a UCF hater. I am trying to grow out of it. UCF fans sometimes have unrealistic expectations for what their football team is every year, and I get it.
7 years ago, we were the national champions.
Sure, you were. You know what? If you want to claim it, no one's going to.
It says it in our stadium.
Yeah, I could go buy a banner at FAU and go say we won the national championship.
Alabama's claimed national championships.
Whatever. Josh Heupel is a good football coach, and he runs a very good offense. And they have a quarterback who is very good in Nico.
Say it.
I'm gonna have to pull it up because I have to actually see where all the letters are together. I think, and it's not right. It's Iyamalev. I butchered that. I just completely butchered that.
Yeah, I don't think you were close.
That's why everyone just calls him Nico because we can pronounce Nico.
We're calling Nico.
Nico is a very talented quarterback who has gotten experience. He played the bowl game last year. He looked really good in that bowl game. There's enough there that can make them win a national championship, but I don't think they do it. So I think that like my best sleeper pick is Alabama because Jalen Milroe is your quarterback. You've got good running back play. If a receiver steps up and that defense is as good as I think that defense can be, Kalen DeBoer led Washington to a national title game last year. Alabama's a lot more talented than Washington was last year, and Washington had dudes. So, I think Alabama can win the national championship, but man, I think it's going to come down to one of Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon. As much as I hate saying that, because I don't want it to come down to one of those three teams, but I think it's going to, and I'm going to put my money on Ohio State because of how much talent that offense has, and it feels like Ryan Day's last chance to be something in college. Because I don't know if he can survive losing to Michigan or losing in the playoff again. I don't think he can.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I do think that this is the year with Will Howard, with that running back duo, with the team they have. I think this is the year Ohio State does it.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be. It has to be at this point.
And before we get off, every week and every episode we do, I like to give a list because we're the list. And the list started as a negative connotation of people who hated on the Dolphins. But now I'm trying to transform it into a positive thing. So this is 16 names in college football right now that will make us feel old. Have you seen this yet?
I have not seen this list, but I guarantee you I know some of these names I'm going to go, wait, he's still in college? And I'll know he's still in college. So
there are 16 names. This was tweeted out earlier by FanDuel. The first two names are obvious. It's Shedeur Sanders and Shiloh Sanders of Colorado.
Yes.
You have A.J. Vinatieri is the kicker for Louisville.
Yeah.
Kennedy Urlacher is the safety for Notre Dame.
Give me a break, man. I just want to ask, is Kennedy Urlacher like his father where he can only move one direction, but he's really good at moving one direction?
That's funny. Moose Muhammad III is a receiver for Texas A&M. Willis McGahee IV is a linebacker for Nebraska.
Gross.
E.J. Warner is the quarterback for Rice.
Yes, and he's very good. He's very good.
I have a dynasty in Rice that's currently awaiting playing the 2026 national championship when we get off of this. Cole Pennington is the quarterback for Marshall.
I've seen people say he's good. I've not watched him, but I've seen people say he's like at least decent.
Mason Taylor, Jason Taylor's son.
God, I covered Mason Taylor in high school. That's disgusting.
Yeah.
I'm old.
Antonio Gates Jr. is a receiver for Michigan State. Christian Driver, son of Donald Driver.
That's the one I didn't know.
Receiver for Minnesota.
That's the one I didn't know.
E.J. Smith, son of Emmitt Smith, is at Texas A&M.
Yeah, he was at Stanford before.
Yep. Christian Harrison, Rodney Harrison's son, is a defensive back at Tennessee.
I didn't know Rodney Harrison had a kid.
Right? Exactly. And we got 3 more here. Eden James, son of Edgerrin James.
Covered him in high school
Howard.
too. That is gross.
Henry Hasselbeck, the son of Matt Hasselbeck.
No shot. No shot.
Matt, at UCLA.
No shot. Matt Hasselbeck has a kid who's
Matt
playing college
Hasselbeck
football.
as a kid in college. And one that'll make us feel really old as we're signing off here is Owen McCown, the next in line of McCowns, son of Josh McCown, who literally left the NFL a couple years ago.
They didn't include this one, but I feel like we have to include this one because, guys, I hate to do this to all of you. We'll close off on this. I just want to make sure that this is the right.
You're really closing off on a banger, Kevin.
Yes, I just wanted to confirm before I made everyone else feel old. I would just like to inform everyone that Devin Hester's kid is playing college football this year.
Wow. Where is he?
Devin Hester Jr. is a wide receiver at Furman.
Wow.
A freshman wide receiver at Furman.
Wow.
So if you really want to feel old, just remember that Devin Hester a few years ago was returning a touchdown or a kickoff for a touchdown in the Super Bowl. Now he's got a kid who's old enough to be playing college football.
It's crazy. Frank Gore's kid's a pro.
Yeah. Frank Gore's kid. Frank Gore almost matched his kid in playing in the NFL.
Frank Gore and Frank Gore Jr. were almost LeBron and Bronny.
If Frank Gore had a chance, I think he would have.
For sure. But Kevin, before we get off here, I mean, it's been an hour and a half. It's been a lot of fun. I always appreciate when you come on with us. Is there anything that you're doing? I know you have a podcast.
Well, I don't know if we're ever going to start it again. We had did it last year, and then we had all got busy because, of course, when you have full-time jobs in journalism, you all just get really busy at times. So I cover Kansas State primarily. That's sort of my thing, which is a really funny thing to say, is that the South Florida kid covers Kansas State and lives in Northeast Kansas, of all places, right? I guess the best thing is just like if you want random draft takes about the small school prospect that you have never heard about, because I am the guy who watches Furman play football on Saturday over watching Notre Dame play against like USC. I don't watch Notre Dame USC much. I watch Furman play freaking Elon or whatever, right? So if you want random small school draft takes, follow me on Twitter at RivalsFielder. That's like the best place for all my nonsense. And I call it nonsense because 95% of the time it's just complete and utter nonsense on there.
Well, it's very good and insightful nonsense.
Still nonsense.
Yeah. We'll be back on with the list at some point this week. I'm assuming it'll be after cut day. Kevin, if you'd like to come back on and see which of our 53s got closer, we'd obviously love to have
You know what? If I've got time, I will be on after cut day to give the take about why I was so wrong about player.
Yeah, there's going to be something that Mr. S is going to find a way to clip and make one of us look really, really stupid next week.
It's somehow going to end up being the Liam Eichenberg take, isn't it?
Oh, God, I don't know. If Liam Eichenberg derails another season of podcasts, like, what are we doing here? Like, is this our lives? Like, our whole lives are talking about Liam Eichenberg?
I would like to say the funniest timeline is Liam Eichenberg's really good this year. It won't happen. It won't happen. But it would be really funny if Liam Eichenberg was like, at the end of the year, we were talking about Liam Eichenberg being a mainstay on the Miami Dolphins offensive line.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are closing this episode on the Liam Eichenberg timeline. This is when Doctor Strange looks at all the timelines. This is the Liam Eichenberg timeline.
The alternate reality of this is that Liam Eichenberg's really good at center.
Oh. For Kevin, for Mr. S and Donovan cutting stuff up, for Zach who always does what he does, and for Brett on vacation, I'm Jordan. Spread nothing but love. Have a good night, Dolphins fans.